Welcome back to Ozarks Tonight. By this time tomorrow, Joe Biden will be the president of the United States. Biden will face a multitude of issues as he assumes office, with the coronavirus pandemic being front and center on that list. Our political analyst, Dr. Brian Calfano, is joining us on the show tonight to take a look ahead at the new administration's first 100 days in office. Brian, thanks for being here.
Hey, John, good to see you.
So administrations usually come in with priorities to tackle in a president's first 100 days in office, but how critical will this time period be this year with all the issues facing the country?
Well, they'll be critical for sure, but I want to disabuse people of the idea that 100 days is some kind of official watermark by which we have to measure presidential success. Where this started was during FDR's presidency. Franklin Roosevelt in 1933 came in, we're in the middle of the Great Depression, there's a run on the banks, there's a liquidity crisis, the Federal Reserve isn't keeping up with what's going on, of course, 25% unemployment rate, lots of issues in the country. And FDR made the 100-day mark essentially a benchmark from which we would judge the effectiveness of his various programs that came out of his administration. And then, of course, ever since then, presidents have decided, well, 100 days sounds like a good number, and I should have something done by then. So that's where we get this number from, but it really doesn't have any bearing on legislation that's passed and implementation of programs. In fact, if it takes 100 days, for example, to solve this vaccination issue, we're going to have a lot of problems. Biden's got to get in there quickly and try to get a hold of a national strategy to support state and local health officials and leaders, political leaders especially, to solve the logistic issues dealing with getting those vaccines into arms, because you're looking at really underperforming in getting those vaccinations out. And again, as everyone by now has probably heard too many times for their liking, you need 2 of those vaccinations for the shots to be effective. So, we're seeing shots go into the arms of about 10 million or so people at this point. That's just the first round. There needs to be a pretty robust plan put in place by the new administration. And Biden's going to be building essentially from scratch, because the Trump administration just not made a national strategy a priority. He's turned it over to the states. And you see kind of the patchwork and piecemeal approaches that have been going on. So that's the first thing Biden has to figure out, will be how to get not only vaccinations shipped quickly, but get the protocols in place so that we're not talking about the group 1B 3 weeks from now. Hopefully we're into 1C or whatever and beyond. That's going to be really critical for him in his administration, because this guy, remember, he's supposed to be the can-do government guy with all of his experience. And so he's got to deliver on that and deliver quickly. And then, of course, the economy is the other big one that never seems to go away in terms of a pressing concern for presidents. You've got relatively high unemployment rate. It's uneven around the country. People obviously have been affected in the service industry more than others. So there needs to be some way that Biden is able to work with the Republicans in Congress. And again, I know Democrats are going to have the majority in both chambers, but you're looking at really slim majorities, particularly in the Senate. And if you get a defection from a conservative Democrat, say Senator Joe Manchin in West Virginia, and he decides to essentially go over to the Republican side on some of the spending that's been proposed, then I think Biden's going to have a lot of extra work ahead of him. But again, this potentially plays to Biden's strengths. If you're in the Senate for 30-some years, then presumably you've made the kind of relationships that will last, or at least you understand where your political opponents, namely Mitch McConnell, stand in terms of what they're willing to accept as a caucus, Republican caucus meaning, and where they'll basically put their line in the sand and say, we're not going to move off of this particular number. So I think you're looking at Biden very quickly using whatever levers of persuasion and calling in whatever chits he can in terms of being able to make this next round of coronavirus economic relief a reality. And then everything that follows from that, I think, is going to be up to where Biden wants to go in terms of rolling out priorities for the administration and what the Republicans are going to want to take up in the Senate, working with Chuck Schumer, but also, again, that very slim majority with Kamala Harris as being the tiebreaker vote. It's going to have to be, I think, with McConnell and Biden and Schumer and Pelosi all working kind of as a quartet, if you will, to maneuver these bills along and do so in a way that gets the work done as quickly as possible. If Biden can pull that off, it's going to be a magical accomplishment on his part, and he should get a lot of credit, but there's a lot of heavy lifting ahead.
Now, Biden was a part of the administration that preceded the Trump administration, and a lot of the things that the Obama administration did, the Trump administration went back on, including Paris Climate Agreement, the Iran nuclear deal, just to name a few, trade deals as well. Do you think that Biden will push his administration to get back in some of these deals and priorities that the Obama administration had, that Joe Biden was a part of in those 2 terms?
Sure, of course. He's already said he's going to in terms of the climate accord and the Iran deal. But I think with all of the other issues we have to confront, these are going to be relegated to second or tertiary attention. You're going to get a lot of play on the right-wing media because that's a set of issues really that they're not very happy about. They were very enthusiastic, for instance, when President Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord. The Iran deal was something that I think people on both sides found some issues with, but you really have to go with what is feasible in politics. You're not going to get a perfect agreement. I don't know that the lack of monitoring and the total lack of cooperation now from Iran makes us any safer than we had under that deal. But that deal, of course, had some flaws. And if Biden's smart, he will try to figure out a way to perhaps fix some of those issues. And that's going to require bringing in European allies who have really been the backbone of that agreement since the U.S. left it. In fact, both agreements, really. And coming down, I think, to their level in Europe in terms of what they're looking for and what they need politically to have those deals move forward in a way that benefits the United States, but also takes into account Europe's needs. That was not something that President Trump tended to prioritize over his 4 years. Essentially made a lot of demands on Europe and on NATO, but didn't necessarily give very much. And again, politics is a give and take business. So Biden's going to have to, I think, find the way to really massage those European allies to go back in and figure out ways to make that Iran deal beefier. But also, if there's a way in which Biden can kind of satisfy some folks who are critiquing, I should say, that Paris Accord, I think he needs to do that as well.
All right, we have about 45 seconds left here. Outside of fixing the coronavirus situation here in the U.S. and those other issues that we talked about from the Obama administration, there's still immigration, there's still health care. What is going to be one of the next issues that the Biden administration needs to tackle? I guess infrastructure would be another one, possibly on the list.
Well, we've been talking about infrastructure since Obama. I mean, these are things that just keep coming back. They're just perennials in politics. But, in terms of immigration, you saw the caravan stopped in Mexico recently. Healthcare continues to be an issue. I think Biden will look for executive order solutions for some of those things. He can't do all of it by executive order, though. He's going to, again, have to sit down with that quartet, working together with those leaders in Congress to figure out what is within the realm of the possible with what Republicans are willing to go along with these slim majorities for the Democrats, and then try to build a coalition from there. It's a tall order, but again, if someone with Biden's essentially experience, really, storied experience in Washington can pull it off, I think we'll be in better shape overall as a result.
All right. Our political analyst, Dr. Brian Calfano. Brian, thanks for being here.
Thanks, John.
All right. We'll be back with more Ozarks Tonight right after this.